Piscatori of Durham University. He told me already that he first will give his expose, his conference, and then there's place for discussion. Questions, answers, things like that. You give your opinion. Feel free. All questions are permitted, except the stupid ones, of course. Good. Thank you. Dr.
Thank you. My part is...
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. My part is very short to just present Professor Piscatori. He's head of School of Government and International Affairs at Durham University. He was formerly fellow at Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, University of Oxford. In addition, he has been a research fellow at the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London. Professor Piscatori is the author of Islam in a World of Nation-State, Islamist and Electoral Principle, and co-author with Dale Eichelman, Muslim Politics. He is the editor of Islam in the Political Process and co-editor of Monarchies and Nations, Globalization and Identity in the Arab States of the Gulf. He serves on the editorial boards of various journals, including the Journal of Islamic Studies, the Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs, Islam and Christian-Muslim Relations, and Middle East Critic. He is on the advisory board of several academic centers, including Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding at Georgetown University, and the Center for Arab and Islamic Studies at the Australian National University. And today evening he will discuss with us the Muslim politics, perhaps defining it, some differentiation between Islamic politics and Muslim politics, not only looking at the Arab Spring or after Arab Spring. Perhaps he gives more details about the Islamic political thought and the way in which Muslims are doing their politics. Thanks again to Professor Piscatori, and I give the floor to him.
Thank you very much. Do I need this? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction and the kind invitation to come. You can all hear me? Yes. I want to thank Professor Leuven and Dr. Tueselu and Solia for all their hard work in bringing me here. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. How unfortunate for all of you that you're stuck with me on Valentine's Day. I'm very, very sorry. I'll try to get you out as fast as possible. But I'm pleased to be able to try to talk about Muslim politics. This is a very large subject, and so I will try to break it down into parts, which I'll explain. And as Professor Leuven said, there'll be some of it will be in a sense talking about political theory, but I would also like to bring it down to some events that you would know about, the Arab Spring, etc. And I certainly would be very happy to discuss it afterward. Let me start by saying that we all know that in early 2011, hundreds and hundreds of Egyptians demonstrated in Tahrir Square, calling for the overthrow of Hosni Mubarak, who, as you know, had been in power since 1981, at the time of the assassination of Anwar Sadat. Students, workers, women, men of all classes and ideological positions came together with a very powerful message to the president: Irhad, go. And the demands that were made were, in a sense, quite clear, but relatively simple. The people demand the overthrow of the regime. Well, this is clearly a political moment. We all recognize it as such. We know that the political action of Muslims is a form of politics. But it's not necessarily Muslim politics in the way that I would like to describe it. I'll discuss in the lecture my assumptions about how one can approach this. But I think essentially what I want you to have in mind is politics the same everywhere? Or can we say that there's something culturally specific or different about a Muslim politics? And in a sense, that's the kind of large issue that I want to get at. The lecture is going to unfold in 3 parts. The first part is going to examine what I think are assumptions in the general literature about Islam and politics. And to anticipate my argument, those assumptions are really that religion is distorting in the study of politics, and that there is an inherent authoritarianism to the politics of the Muslim world. That's, in a sense, I want to unpack those assumptions that are part of the study of Islam and politics. The second part of the lecture is going to interrogate whether Islam prescribes a particular political order. Is there a particular political solution that is prescribed and ordained by Islam and Islamic principles? And the third part of the lecture is going to focus in on the specific phenomenon of Islamism, particularly since the Arab Spring. And I hope that these individual parts will come together, and you'll see that I'm essentially trying to get at, and in a way, deconstruct this idea of Muslim politics. So let's turn to the first part of the lecture. First part of the lecture is what about the general assumptions that there are out there about the study of Islam in politics. Well, I think you would agree probably that the study of politics in the Muslim world and Muslim societies has not handled religion well. There are, in fact, I think, 3 distorting ways in which religion has been presented to us in political analysis. The first, and would not surprise you to hear this, is in a way influenced by the Enlightenment ethos of progress. It's something that we know has been present in modernization theory, for example, that there must be an inevitable progression towards a secular public order. And that assumption has cast a long shadow over a study of politics in the Islamic world. Political development was thought to, in a sense, require the restriction of Islam to the private sphere, religion to the private sphere. And in a way, there are many variations on this theme, and in some ways that you can see that there is a common ethnocentric bias to this. This is pretty much Western thinking, and one might even say very specifically American thinking about the place of religion in public order. Churches and piety are really to be something which would be private matters rather than public. Politics must be separated from religion, so in order to avoid dogmatism, in order to avoid intolerance, political leaders must somehow remain above the fray, must remain neutral from religious disputes and religious entanglements. And this sort of argument about religion, I think you would recognize has its parallel in understandings of ethnicity. That in a way we must somehow, for political development's sake, we must rise above ethnic, particularistic identities, here including religion. Well, there's a second sort of way in which we've been presented with ideas, and that is that politics has often been seen in a structural way and often in a statist way, through the prism of the state. This is in large part, I think, due to the established view of political studies, that political culture can't really explain important things for us It can't explain causality. It can't explain the timing of a political act. And so often political analysts would prefer to deal with the structural. Such structural factors as class, the political economy, institutional development, they need to be brought to the center of political analysis rather than religion. And here we can see how this applies very specifically to Islamic studies in a way, because there has been an assumption in Islamic studies that the state, whether you define the state as the caliphal state, the imperial state, the modern republican state, the monarchical state, however you define it, that this was typically thought to be strong and society was thought to be weak. And in a way, therefore, this was hindering the development of institutions that would be independent of the state. So in simple terms, civil society would not develop in Muslim societies because of this overpowering nature of the state. These Muslim states were seen as strong. Why? Because Islamic traditions and norms were paramount. They placed the emphasis on the caliphate in Sunni thought. They didn't allow for these intermediary institutions that we would think of as civil society. Then along comes the Iranian Revolution. The Iranian Revolution turns upside down these assumptions, and now it appears that the state wasn't so strong. The powerful state of the Shah was overthrown so quickly, so easily. So maybe society with the Ayatollahs, maybe society with the Bazaris was a little bit stronger. The weaknesses of the military state, in other words, or the national security state, the Mukhabarat state, in a way seemed to be now something we wanted to think about. And so even as we were doing that, we were still measuring everything by whether or not its relationship with the state. So we can find all kinds of examples of people who sort of argued this, but I think it's a powerful strand of thinking. Now, there's a third one, and so again, this is again how religion is thought to play a part in political analysis. And the third one is that politics is conceived as largely coercive, based on power. And this is often the result of a hierarchical sort of command view of decision-making, a top-down approach to politics that in a way complements, sort of is allied with the statist paradigm. And we know that there's a whole sort of sub-genre on soft power, and this idea is now somewhat current in the profession. And I think that sort of flags for us that there are other things than these top-down approaches, that there can be a kind of persuasive politics as well as a coercive politics. And I'm going to argue that maybe religion has something to do with that. But by and large, this is a very minor part of political analysis, the received wisdom. We're kind of stuck in this coercive, statist, top-down approach to politics. In a sense, a kind of compulsion, force, is the way of looking at it. Okay, so that's assumption one of the kind of how has it been told to us what political analysis in the Muslim world is like. Religion is a problem. Second built-in assumption is that politics in the Muslim world is inevitably authoritarian. Inevitably authoritarian. And we've had, a vast amount of literature here about this. And you know about this, and we can talk about it. The endless debates about whether Islam and democracy are compatible. And, you know, there's a lot to be said about that. But the general point being that the starting point of analysis is that there's a kind of a built-in authoritarianism, autocracy to the politics of the Muslim world. And, you know, many people argue that there are reasons why that. Some people say, why? Because of cultural predisposition. Islam's culture is authoritarian. You know, example, Piscatori, who is the professor at London School of Economics, you know, sort of the London school, for a very long time argued that Arab and Muslim political culture lacks traditions which would be compatible with Western ideas of democratic rule. So what we have seen, if there is anything that looks like this, these are just alien. They're just surface. They could not possibly have made don't have any roots within Muslim societies. In fact, what they do is they just use to reinforce a kind of bureaucratic autocracy. Now, there are variations on that sort of view of thought. One of them would say, well, again, it's based in the political culture, and the political culture is kind of patriarchal. It's a homogeneous political culture. Hisham Sharabi is an example here. He said Muslim societies are neo-patriarchal. In other words, they reinforce traditional, historically male domination by making it seem modern, but it really isn't. It's just the old kind of politics, the old kind of society. According to him, for example, in the Arab state, it can be neither modern nor can it be really traditional anymore. Why? He just says it's a kind of modernized version of a traditional sultanate. And really, in a way, that reminds us about Weber. That in a sense here, we've heard this sort of argument before. Weber called it sultanistic regimes. That these are types of societies which are based not on the kind of institutional, participatory political order that we think of, that we want for ourselves, but they're very, very narrowly based dynastic sort of rule. And he says that these kinds of regimes are just destined to chaotic collapse. They can't survive. They'll just eventually collapse. So we have a pretty good idea of this. And